Hi, I'm John Dinkle, and this is the Growth in Business podcast for Citybiz, where we talk with local and national leaders in sales, marketing, and business development to learn more about new and trusted strategies to grow your business. I'm here today with Lisa First-Willis, CEO of Truvelop. So, welcome, Lisa. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me, John. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too. So I thought we'd start our conversation by taking a couple of minutes to get to know a little bit more about Truvelop. And while you're at it, could you tell us about your role there and a brief background?
Sure, I sure can. Thank you again for having me. Super excited to talk to you all about Truvelop today. So, my background is 25 plus years in HR, and I'm a career HR executive. I've worked in global organizations, I've worked in startups, I've worked all over the world, and I'm also now an HR tech entrepreneur. I'm the CEO and co founder of Truvelop, and we are a retention platform for today's workforce.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And thanks again for being here. So, as you know, we want to talk about growth today. So I thought I'd start out by asking you, what has been your greatest strategy around the growth of Truvelop?
I thought that was an interesting question, John. And as I thought about it a lot over the weekend, it really made me think about, well, your strategy around the growth of your company. Are we talking pre pandemic? Are we talking during the pandemic? Are we talking post pandemic? Because our growth strategy, as I'm sure a lot of tech startups experienced during this time, it changed. What we were doing 2 years ago compared to what we've done in the last year, compared to the beginning of 2022, it's totally different. It is very different in the way that we've approached inbound, outbound, and just overall growth in general. And certainly as a startup, you are used to pivoting anyways, and you have to pivot quickly. And if you see things are changing, then you need to be able to move and respond very, very quickly. For us specifically, during the pandemic, we increased spend on digital marketing efforts, obviously due to not being able to have in-person meetings. And we weren't able to go to events. We weren't able to do all the traditional business development activities that certainly you've shared with me over the years. And I follow what you do very closely. That's very important to me. So that's all changed, right? So we had to figure out how we were going to still be a thought leader. And certainly with my background in HR and now in HR tech, we really focused on online channels for thought leadership. So whether that was LinkedIn or social, but really increasing that and increasing spend on digital marketing was important. If I look at post-pandemic, and now that we are back with in-person meetings, events are starting to tick back up in the last 6 months. We now have a nice balance, right, of both in-person and online presence. So I personally have ramped up my travel schedule and hitting solid events locally, speaking at different conferences that are now being really well attended again. That's an important shift just from getting out there beyond your regional market. That's what I've seen that's been a little bit different in the last 6 months, especially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think things are starting to really open up, as you mentioned, in the past 6 months, especially the trade show piece and things. People are starting to get out there a lot more. So, getting back to that, in-person meetings and face-to-face activities, I'm sure is really important to you guys.
Absolutely. And, we are all about certainly developing relationships. So much of what you do in HR tech is talk about how we impact the overall employee experience, right? And that is all a relationship building exercise. So we're doing the same thing, right?
That's great. Talk about. I know this is probably a similar question, but what would you say are three inhibitors to growth over the past, let's just say, 12 months? I know we've been transitioning out of this, kind of pandemic era and back into more, hopefully, traditional marketing and networking and business development. But if you were to look back over the past year, 18 months, what would you say your three inhibitors to growth would have been?
So I'm going to focus on the most challenging, and that has been the number of the amount of turnover that we've seen in our buyer persona, right? So oftentimes we're selling into the HR leader, right? Or we're selling into COO, CFO, but we've seen a lot more turnover of the buyer. So a lot of management personnel has turned over in the last year. So someone who we had built an amazing relationship with during the pandemic, who we were having regular conversations with, maybe it's, a 3, 6 month, 12-month sale. If you're talking to an enterprise customer, and then you suddenly find out they're leaving or they've left. And it was such a surprise. We have seen that trend definitely emerge in the last 6 to 12 months, where you're seeing a lot of turnover in executive management, HR leadership. And that's definitely been a challenge, because if that happens, then we have to restart the buying cycle, right? Reintroduce the product, reintroduce what we're doing. And that has really been a challenge for us.
Yeah, I can see that. Now to help that, do you now then start to widen your relationships at those companies, knowing that that's been like the trend, and and I guess expanding your relationships to other parts of the company to continue to have dialogue, or are you or no?
No, John, you're absolutely spot on. So anytime that we can invite both HR and operations to the table, that's what we try to do. That's very, very smart, because then you obviously, if one person does turn over, if you have two people in love with your product, which if I get two people on the phone or during in a call, they're going to both fall in love with the product, right? So the more buyers at the table, the better. That's ideal, and that's been something that we've pushed our sales team on, is making sure that we're hitting a lot of different people at an organization, not just the HR lead. Really, really smart tactic for sure.
Yeah, that's smart. That's smart. So you talked about this a little bit before, kind of the inbound and outbound thing. But in your view, as the CEO of Truvelop, what's more important, do you think, to a company's growth? Is it inbound lead generation or outbound lead generation?
I would, I think it's a balance, and I know that's not the answer that you probably want to hear. It'd be interesting to know, is it outbound, or is it inbound? Which one is it, Lisa? But it's for us. For us, it's been finding the right balance, right? So, if now that we are back in person at the trade shows, the events, and the conferences, that is generating huge leads for us, right? So any chance that I get now to do a speaking engagement, I will, because I get to bring the team, and that's important, right? So now, if I'm speaking at an event and we have my whole team there, and we have a booth, then wow, that's an awesome way to drive traffic. But it's also that's a great way to do it, and that's going to drive a lot of activity. From an outbound perspective, for us, there's a balance there too, right? Because if we have a really strong sales development rep, right, getting back, setting the meetings, getting the meetings scheduled, that's ideal, right? So if I can lead up my calendar with 2 to 3 prospecting calls or discovery calls or first demo held calls, right? I'd love to see 2 to 3 meetings a week or more being scheduled. And that's obviously important. But if I have a balance of inbound leads coming in through content download, through schedule a demo, through anything that we're doing to capture the inbound lead activity, that's awesome, because now I have not only meetings being scheduled where there's already been some prep, but now we have new meetings as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's smart. It's funny. When I ask that question, I always get a little bit different answers, which I love. That's why I like asking it because I guess, in some industries, the inbound piece tends to be a little bit more important than outbound. They're getting tons of leads in through the digital marketing that they're doing, or things like that. But then in other industries, it is really a lot of relationship building and being out in the market. So I definitely am a firm believer in having both of those strategies as a way to grow the business. And I really think you can't do have one without the other. You had mentioned the relationship piece too, which, as you know, I'm a huge believer in relationship marketing and building relationships with prospects and partners to grow the business. What was, in your eyes, how important is that nowadays? Especially as we're coming through this virtual environment and getting back into the face to face stuff for Truvelop and for growing your client base. How important is relationship building to you guys?
It's huge, John. And what I love is when you've been pushing outbound lead generation activities, or email campaigns with a very targeted message, targeted audience, and then you run into those people now at events or at a trade show, for example. That is amazing because you've had conversations over Zoom for the last year, right? Now suddenly you're in person, and they say, "Oh my gosh, it's so great to finally meet you in person. I love your content. I love all of the messaging that you guys have been pushing out over the last 6 to 12 months. Wow, you're really staying ahead of everything that's happening." I love walking into that conversation. That's fantastic. That's a win.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a good point. For the past, 18 months, 24 months, we've been seeing people via video, and to finally see them in person, it feels like you do get kind of know them now. And it's a much more of a warm lead than, having a phone call or, something like that. I think one of the benefits of, if anything, with the pandemic, is this opportunity to see people virtually for even like 30-minute, just kind of intro meetings, and to try to qualify them, see if they are a good fit, see if it's a good to take that next step. And a lot of times, at least now, it seems that next step is in person as opposed to a second Zoom meeting, which I think is pretty efficient, right?
It is. So if you can start with perhaps that first call, it's a video call, it goes very well. You may do, a quick demo of the product, but let's get ready for the deeper dive and let's bring more people to the table. I want that meeting to be in person, 100%. And that is a solid, solid strategy. They're introduced to the product through, traditional, if you want to call it traditional outbound marketing, right? We're pushing things out. We push out a lot of content. We've got, great blog content that we write, and we're really that subject matter expert when it comes to manager-employee relationships. For us, with our product with Truvelop, and also with, developing frontline workers, driving the employee experience, focusing on retention. We've got that down. And I think the pandemic forced you to really do a better job with what you are putting out there, right? And being very thoughtful about your content and your content creation. But being able to have that meeting virtually, follow up with a larger audience in person. I'll fly anywhere around the country for that, because that's ideal.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. What's one thing, like, you would say recently, that you've learned about sales or marketing that you feel has started to impact the business? I'd say in the past, like, six to 9 months. Is there anything new that you guys have tried, or that you're doing now, or you've learned that, oh man, this is starting to really click? We're going to keep continuing to do this. Have you noticed anything that you're doing?
Yes, and I'm actually very excited that you asked that question. It's very interesting for us and where we are in our startup growth pattern, in our journey, right? And where we are today. So in the beginning, we sold to everybody. We sold to everybody. We believed everyone had this problem. And over the course of the last 6 months, especially, we have really taken a step back to say, um, who is truly that target customer? Stop selling to everyone and focus in on the target customer. Get laser focused and super dialed into who are we truly selling to and what is the problem that we are solving for them. The shift for us, which has been really, really strong, is focusing on the hourly worker, where retention is the highest and where there is the biggest challenge facing so many companies today. It's with that frontline hourly worker. And how do we build an amazing workplace where frontline hourly employees are inspired to stay because they're respected, they feel valued, they always know where they stand? That's what our product helps with. So we've really helped companies start to rethink and prioritize that hourly employee experience versus trying to sell to everybody, right? Where we have the biggest impact and we're solving the biggest problem is around hourly worker retention in a large industrial, operations-based, manufacturing type environment. That's where we've learned to be very focused in our messaging and really make sure that we're staying true to that message, right? Because otherwise, your content is going to be all over the place and you're not able to really zero in on that piece of the messaging.
Yeah, yeah, that's smart. What's that saying? The riches are in the niches. I think a lot of companies do struggle with that because they feel they feel that their product or service can reach everybody, and maybe it can, but there might be an expertise level or certain situations that their product or service is even more well defined or more well served, and they don't do what you did and step back for a minute and say, all right, wait a minute, let's take a look at the past. Let's look at the past like couple years or year, see where our successes have been, and how can we imitate that and grow on it. Last question was, what technology are you using to enhance your kind of inbound and outbound lead gen?
So I think, as you know, John, we've always, it's not necessarily technology because I love to leverage interns. And with in HR tech, especially in HR thought leadership, you really have to have solid, strong content creation. So we've really focused on that, making sure that the messaging is clean, it's tight, and keeping it fresh and posting constantly. That's been really, really important. We have HubSpot as our CRM, right? So we have really become subject matter experts in this lightweight, middle, startup and mid-sized company tool. Because as a startup, you got to take advantage of tools that are affordable. So we use our HubSpot. We also use ZoomInfo. We use some other different technology platforms that are plugins. We do a lot of try this software for 30, 60 days for free. You just making use of a lot of different tools, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And unfortunately, we're about out of time. Really appreciate you being here, Lisa, to talk to us about Truvelop and your expertise around growth. And congrats on the growth of Truvelop. It's great to see. Really enjoyed the conversation. And if the audience wants to get more information about Truvelop, where should they go?
They should go to truvelop.com. They can also visit us on LinkedIn. They can visit us on Facebook. Go to our website, reach out, and we'd love to talk to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. It's great seeing you. Appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much.